Ever find yourself, scrolling through Instagram or TikTok or whatever, or maybe chatting with friends online, and you kind of stop and wonder, like, are we really connecting through all these screens?
Yeah, it's a question we're all grappling with these days, right? And it's
Yeah.
kind of like at the heart of how friendships are changing. So we've done a pretty deep dive into this whole thing, gathered up a ton of research and expert opinions just to try and unpack it all.
Exactly. And the big question for us, and really I think for a lot of people listening, is whether these digital connections we're making are, well, as real and meaningful as those good old-fashioned face-to-face friendships, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we're going to look at both the good and the, well, maybe not so good.
Right. And to really understand it, it helps to take a step back and think about what friendship, traditionally was,
Yeah.
like before all the tech stuff came along.
Yeah, back in the day, you knew your friends because you saw them, right? You
Mhm.
hung out, did things together, you were there for each other in person. It was kind of tangible.
Exactly. That physical presence was a big part of it. But now, well, things are totally different, right? You can have friendships that start and exist entirely online, even with people you've never met in person. It really makes you wonder, what does real connection actually mean now?
Right, like what even is a friend anymore?
Totally. And one thing that's pretty amazing about these digital connections is the ability to connect with people literally anywhere in the world.
It's crazy, right? You could be bonding with someone on the other side of the planet over some super niche hobby, or finding support in an online community that spans continents. I mean, those kinds of connections just weren't possible before.
And think about keeping up with those long distance friends. It used to be all about expensive phone calls or waiting weeks for letters. Now it's instant.
Boom, quick text, a funny meme, a video call that almost feels like you're in the same room. It's a total game changer for maintaining those relationships.
And we can't forget about online communities. For people who maybe feel isolated or who have interests that aren't so common, these digital spaces can be a lifeline.
Oh, yeah, whether it's a forum for like vintage typewriter enthusiasts or a support group for, I don't know, people who collect those little hotel shampoo bottles, whatever it is, these online communities offer this incredible sense of belonging and understanding. It can be huge.
And there's the pure convenience of it all, right?
Mhm.
You can connect across different time zones and crazy schedules. You can send a text in the middle of the night, respond to a message while you're waiting in line at the grocery store.
It's like friendship on your terms, basically.
Exactly. And some research actually suggests that this constant ability to chat can really strengthen companionship.
Hmm. Interesting. So you're saying it's not all bad.
Well, not necessarily, but of course, there are potential downsides too, right? Like one big one is the lack of physical presence and all those nonverbal cues we rely on in person.
Ugh, tell me about it. How many times have you gotten into a text fight because you completely misread the tone? It happens all the time. It's so easy to misinterpret things when you can't hear someone's voice or see their facial expressions.
Totally. And it can make it hard to build truly deep connections. Sometimes, it feels like online interactions stay pretty surface level. It's all likes and comments. And I don't know, it can almost feel like a performance sometimes.
Yeah, like you can have hundreds of online friends but still feel kind of lonely.
Exactly. And then there's the whole issue of, well, cyberbullying and just general negativity online. It can be a lot more intense in the digital world.
It's sad, but it feels like the anonymity of the internet sometimes brings out the worst in people. It's kind of scary.
And then there's this thing, and it's something to really think about, that all this time we're spending online could actually be taking away from our real life relationships.
It's that whole alone in a crowded room feeling, right? Like you're physically with people, but mentally checked out scrolling through your phone.
Exactly. So it's like this balancing act. And honestly, the research on all this is pretty fascinating. Like the Pew Research Center found that a whopping 57% of teenagers have made a new friend online.
Wow, that's a lot. So it's not just a small thing, it's actually how a lot of people are connecting these days, especially younger folks.
Right. And most of them met through social media, which isn't surprising, but a good chunk also connected through video games.
It's like a whole social scene happening online.
Totally. And they also found that, texting is super common among teens. Like over half of them text their friends every single day.
It's like their main way of staying in touch.
Exactly. And get this, a study from UC Irvine actually suggests that online friendships can be just as meaningful as face-to-face ones, at least for teenagers.
Really? That's kind of surprising.
I know, right? But they found that these digital connections can offer a lot of support and companionship.
Yeah.
And, sometimes having that little bit of distance, like when you're texting, can actually give you more time to think about how you want to respond which can be helpful in tricky situations.
That's a good point. It's like you have a moment to process your emotions before you say something you might regret.
Exactly. But it's important to note that not everyone agrees, you know? Like, there's this academic paper from 2012 that argues that online friendships just don't have all the same essential elements as in-person ones.
Okay, so there's some debate about this whole thing.
Yeah, definitely. This paper basically says that because you're missing that real-life interaction, those virtual connections might be a lesser form of friendship and could even lead to more isolation in the long run.
Hmm, that's something to think about.
It is. And when you look at what experts and, just everyday people are saying, it gets even more complicated. Like psychologists often emphasize that it's really the quality of the interaction that matters, not so much whether it's online or offline.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like you can have a really deep, meaningful conversation online just as much as you can in person.
Exactly. And some sociologists are even saying that our whole definition of friendship is changing because of technology. Like we have all these new ways to connect and stay in touch, so our ideas about what makes a good friend are evolving too.
I read somewhere about this concept of active friendship. It's like you have to be
Sure.
more deliberate about maintaining your connections in the digital age? It's not enough to just passively scroll through someone's feed. You actually have to put in the effort to reach out and engage.
Exactly. And I think everyone has their own experiences with this, right? Some people have formed amazing friendships online that have become just as important as their offline ones.
But then you hear about people who have tons of online connections but still feel totally lonely. It's not a guarantee, that's for sure.
Right. So it really comes down to how we manage all of this. I mean, one thing that can be tough is just the sheer number of ways we can connect now. It's like you have to check your texts, your DMs, your email. It can feel
Yeah,
overwhelming.
totally. It's like a second job keeping up with everything.
Yeah, so it's really about being intentional, like taking the time to send a voice message or share a photo instead of just firing off a quick text, and scheduling those video calls to get that face-to-face time, even if it's virtual.
It's about being mindful of how we're connecting and making sure we're putting in the effort to build real depth in those relationships.
Absolutely. So I think what we've learned from this whole deep dive is that there's no easy answer to the question of whether we're really connected in the digital age. It depends on so many things, our own experiences, how we're using technology, and the effort we're putting into those connections.
Yeah, it seems like digital friendships have this huge potential to be really positive and supportive, but they also come with some challenges. It's not just about the number of online friends you have, it's about the quality of those connections and how you're balancing your digital life with your real life.
Right? They can be a fantastic complement to our offline relationships, but they might not be able to fully replace those in-person connections that give us that sense of, really being seen and understood.
So, here's something for everyone listening to chew on. How are your digital friendships shaping your life? Are they bringing you closer to people or making you feel more isolated? And what can you do to make sure those connections are as meaningful as possible? It's all about taking a step back and really thinking about how we're navigating this whole new world of digital friendship.
And making it work for us, right?
Exactly, making it work for us. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone.
Thanks for listening.